In this second video in the FMCP series, we will install the required firmware on the CPX-E-CEC PLC and the CMMT-AS-MP servo drive. Please note that the FMCP multi-axes can support 3 kinematics with 3 or more axes each. It will be necessary to update the firmware in each of the CMMT-AS-MP servo drives that the CPX-E-CEC PLC will control in the application. You will need to connect your programming PC to the ETH1 RJ45 port of the CPX-E-CEC PLC with a RJ45 cable in order to update the firmware. This video will demonstrate one way to change the IP address on the PLC to the desired network settings. It will also be necessary to change the IP address on the programming PC to an IP address on the same subnet. Let's get started changing the IP address on the CPX-E-CEC by starting the Festo device tool. Note the default address of 192.168.0.1. Now, let's right-click on the device and click on Network. Set the IP address and subnet mask to the desired settings for your network, and then click the OK button. The CPX-E-CEC will update automatically. Click the scan icon in the upper left of the page and verify that the IP address has updated to the desired settings. Now, before installing the bootloader, let's verify that the firmware showing in the CPX-E-CEC is not already set to 3.2.10, and if it is, we can skip Step 1B and Step 2. Now, let's install the CPX-E-CEC bootloader version 11.0.4. This step is required to update the firmware to version 3.2.10 in the next step. Right-click on the CPX-E-CEC in the list view. Click on Firmware. Confirm that you want to continue by clicking the Yes button on the pop-up screen. After FFT has connected to the CPX-E-CEC, click the OK button and then highlight the CPX-E-CEC bootloader version 11.0.4 file dated November 25, 2021 in the firmware file list, and then click on the Download Firmware button and click the Yes button to confirm the download. When the bootloader file has finished downloading, click the OK button and then verify that the current version on the CPX-E-CEC is the bootloader version 11.0.4. Then close the web page and continue to the next step. Step 2. Installing the CPX-E-CEC firmware version 3.2.10. Click the Connect button. Once the connection has been established, click the OK button. Next, highlight the CPX-E-CEC firmware version 3.2.10 dated November 25, 2021 from the firmware list, and then click on Download Firmware. Then click the Yes button to confirm the download. Click the OK button to acknowledge that the firmware download has completed. Then verify that the current version of firmware on the device is correct. Now, you can close the web page and the Festo Field Device tool. This completes the firmware download to the CPX-E-CEC PLC. In Step 3, we will change the IP address on the CMMT-AS-MP to the desired network settings and change the firmware to version 32.0.9.9. First, we will need to connect the programming PC to the CMMT-AS-MP X18 RJ45 port on the front of the device with an RJ45 cable. In addition, you will need to set the IP address on the programming PC to a static IP address on the same desired network. In Step 3A, we will set the IP address on the CMMT-AS-MP. Let's get started by opening the Festo Automation Suite. Now, click on the Device Scan button. Click on the CMMT-AS in the device list. Then click Network Settings in the action list on the right-hand side of the page. Then enter your desired IP address, subnet mask, and gateway address if needed, and then click Activate New Settings. Click the OK button to confirm the device reboot notification, and then click the OK button on the Network Settings Updated Successfully notification. Next, Automation Suite will rescan for devices. Once the device shows back up under the device list, double-check that the IP address is set correctly. Next, we will update the firmware on the CMMT-AS device to version 32.0.9.9. Click on the CMMT-AS that you want to update in the device list. Then, click the firmware action in the action list on the right-hand side of the page. Automation Suite will check the compatibility of each firmware in the list. Click on the firmware version 32.0.9.9 and click the Transfer to Device button. Then click the OK button to confirm the firmware download. The firmware may have to be downloaded from the Festo cloud prior to being transferred to the device. Congratulations! You have completed setting the IP addresses on the programming ports of both devices, and you have set the devices to the correct firmware versions for the Festo Motion Control package.